Hi everyone, this is Scarlo, and I'm here to tell you something very intimate with me. I couldn't understand fibromyalgia, much less why my body was hurting from head to toe. I went to my doctor and asked him, after some research that I had done about fibromyalgia, to understand the why. How did I come to have fibromyalgia? What were the stressors? And I found that I did have a stressor that caused my body to go into complete shock. And what it was is that I had a very massive, like I've never had anything like this happen before, where my kids were taken away from me based on lies and deception. What does this exactly mean? Well, I'm going to get into that. But to start out with, my kids were a part of my dream. I always had wanted to have kids, to raise them, to teach them, to grow with them, to learn with them, to help them along the way and teach them the things that I had been taught growing up. And I thought that this was such an amazing thing until I realized that I was in a really bad, toxic relationship. And it was not exactly the kind of relationship that I wanted to be in. I was pushed into this relationship after trying to get away. I was very firm that this was not good. But no matter how much I said, this is not good, I cannot be a part of this, I ended up being a part of it regardless. And it was the beginning of a very crazy roller coaster ride. I later discovered that I had been put into what's called an arranged marriage. Although it's not a traditional arranged marriage, it was an arranged marriage, so to speak, which I get into in a moment. Mental health was used against me in a court of law. I was diagnosed with ADHD and bipolar. And this was used against me in a court of law, as well as lies stating that I had left when I hadn't, for the duration that I was said that I had left. I was trying to get away from the abuse and from the toxic situation, and instead of it being the amount that was stated in the courts, it was like way less than what they stated. Anyhow, because of this, the courts decided to award him the children full custody. And I remember distinctly when I heard this that I broke down in complete shakes from head to toe. And as I did, I said, they're taking them and giving them back to their abuser. My mom even remembers it to this day of how traumatic it was. It was so emotional and so crazy for that day that even the neighbor heard me break down in tears and shakes. They tried to comfort me, but for the most that they tried to comfort me, it was not helping at any cost, any ways. They kept trying to massage, they kept trying to comfort me with words, everything. It just was not working. So at the end of a 3.5 hour ordeal of shakes, tremors, tears, I was still in tears because they had just taken my kids and given them to their abuser. Although technically they had not given them to their abuser, but to his uncle. But I knew in my heart of hearts that it was going to be, they were going to go back to him. And sure enough, he called me later and rubbed it in like salt into a wound, telling me how I was missing out and everything, because he was there with the kids, even though by legal standpoint, he wasn't allowed to be around the kids. So I went back to this situation and I shared it with the doctor, and he said, yep, that would be the onset of the fibromyalgia, the extreme stressor. Now, not everybody's story is the same. This just happens to be mine. This was just the very, very icing on the cake, because before that, I had gone through little stressors. I had been told that I couldn't be in a school that I knew would help me in theater, in performing arts, because I always wanted to be in entertainment, in acting, and still do to this day. I'm almost to the point where I'd rather just do a talk show and help people with fibromyalgia, chronic pain, and chronic fatigue syndrome, and help people who deal with these on a daily basis, as well as family, friends, and coworkers, so that they can understand that fibromyalgia is not an end. In fact, once you discover the true meaning behind it all, you can actually help others. So that was the beginning of the long road ahead. I ended up, by the time it was all said and done, in a wheelchair. Yeah, me in a wheelchair. I was so overwhelmed with so much grief that I didn't know how to function anymore. By the time it was said and done, I had a new man in my life. Wonderful man. I adored him. I still adore the memories that he's left. He taught me so much, and it was such a wonderful joy to be able to be with to know love, to know genuine love in its purest form. No stress, no anxiety. It was, besides amazing and elated, it was also stressful. The reason it was stressful is because at the time that I got that man, I ended up getting divorced, and it was a blessing of a divorce. It was court ordered, and I was so relieved to have that court ordered divorce. But I lost everything when I achieved this goal. In the process, I was also court ordered not to pay child support at the very beginning. And yes, I ended up having to pay court-ordered child support to this abuser. Now, at the time, I didn't know the whole scope of everything, because to get the kids was not exactly the easiest. The first one, I wanted so badly. The second one, not so much. And the third one, I was desperate. I really did want. So how it ended up happening was that I was so heartfelt connected with this man, and I didn't want to be away from him until the child support started following me, and then they started pressing me to work. I had to work. Even though my body was not cooperating with me, I had to find a job. So that was a stressor, to be forced to find a job. And in the process of getting the jobs, and I say jobs because I couldn't hold down a job, not because I didn't want to, but because it was so much emotional stress to know that I had these kids that were in this situation, and to know I had no control over the situation. And again, I didn't understand the mindset process or the spiritual process or any of this. I was still in the learning phase. was living across the street from a police department in the state. So I went to the people that were in charge of the place we were living at and asked them, because it was a protected area, I asked them if the police were to come, because this was how bad it was getting. I was getting orders to the point that they were saying, we're going to have the police come after you. So I had done nothing wrong except for struggling to pay this support and dealing with my abuser. They said no, if the police came in with a warrant or a bench warrant or anything like that, they would have to come and they would have to take me. So because of that, I had to leave him, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. On top of that, I learned that they would go after him if I didn't provide. So I sent him away to his family because he was from Mexico, and I knew that they couldn't touch him in Mexico. He didn't understand why I was sending him away. He never did, even to his dying day. And yes, he passed, and that became another stressor. The child support order still kept coming. I managed to avoid that warrant issue, and I ended up in a new relationship. The new relationship was that of protect me, save me from the situation. And my mom said, well, we got a new attorney for you so that we can help you to get through this. Only to learn that that attorney was the one who helped my ex to get what he got through the lies. Now, mind you, the same attorney that said, no, he needs the kids, came back and said, those kids should have never been taken from her. So when we got into the courts, he tried to get himself excused from the case. The judge said, have you worked this particular case before? And he said, no. And he said, I can't let you be relinquished from this case. This is where I began to not have faith or trust in the government system, in the court system, because he had to deal with his actions and now his reaction to the foul play. He admitted that it should have never happened the way it was, but it was what it was. So they were ready to take me off in handcuffs until I laid out 3 applications for jobs. As they reviewed these jobs, they said, okay, we need you to get a job and you need to pay the support no matter what, and the minimum amount, you need to take care of this. Now, mind you, that beginning stressor was the kids. Then we had the stressor of my late husband getting ill. And then we have the stressor of having the police right there, and having a stressor again of being threatened to be put into jail because I wouldn't pay my abuser. I struggled so hard for all these years, and by the time that was said and done, I had a job, and I got to the point where this guy that I had connected with, who I thought would help me through the situation, was actually making the situation a bit worse. He didn't mean to, it just ended up being a bit worse. And I kept working and working and working to the point that my body broke down. Not because of just the child support order, but also because of the home issue. I went from being a worker on the floor, because I had taken on a call center position, to working at home as a caregiver to this man and helping to take care of him and to deal with that. Now, mind you, I wasn't being paid for all of this work, only for the stuff that was for me being a caregiver. I wasn't being paid for it. Me being in call center work, I was getting paid for it, and they were attaching that money to pay the child support. And all that was playing in the back of my head was how they were giving money to my abuser to the kids' abuser. And all of the rules and regulations that they placed down, the visitations, the knowing of where the funds were going, all this stuff was totally off the chart. In other words, he totally did not honor it. I didn't see the kids. And even though they said, yeah, go on, you're allowed to see the kids with supervision, because I was declared a risk. I was declared a flight risk. He was so afraid that I was going to take off with the kids. And it's like, no, but whatever. So I ended up not only having stress on myself, but having stress on my family and the people that they decided, the courts decided, would be supervising my visitation with my kids. And my family was like, you know what? You are not this person that they have portrayed you to be. You don't need supervision. You just need somebody to say, yeah, everything's fine. It was so stressful that my body was just, I was getting tired out. I was being fatigued at every time I turned around. Every time a stressful situation came in, I was fatigued. I couldn't function. I was struggling. So by the time that was done, I had lost this man who was so wonderful and so loving. He was my second husband, and I lost him. He passed complications of TB, and that hurt me really hard. And I still had no comprehension of how this was affecting me until I went to my doctor and started talking more and more. As I finished all of this situation, I was carrying, I had him cremated against the family's decision, but I'm kind of glad I did, because the family wanted him to, a part of him at least, to go to his home to be with his family. And so I separated it, and had I honored their traditions, that wouldn't have been able to happen. So I'm really thankful I went against that tradition. But at the same time, I held on to that, and I was carrying him with me everywhere I went, just because I was having a struggle. I mean, I was struggling to have lost my kids. Now I've lost the most wonderful man. I was sleeping next to his ash. I was carrying his ash with me everywhere I went, and this man could not deal with it. So I went to church with my mother and ran into this lovely man whom I thought was married for sure, only to learn later that he wasn't, and he was very interested in me. Now, mind you, by this time, I was not in a wheelchair. I had worked myself to a walker. Okay, so I was going everywhere in a walker. When I went to the church, I was in a walker with his urn in the basket and walking everywhere. And the situation was getting really troublesome, and I had lost the job at the call center. My hip had given out. So I had to let go of that. I went to long-term disability, and at that time, fibromyalgia was not classified as a disability. It was not classified as a Social Security disability program potential. But people wanted me to file for Social Security, or at least for SSI, Supplemental Security Income. Now, I had filed with my late husband. I had filed for it, and I had gotten an amount. I had gotten a lump sum. This was back in 2000. And I ended up with this man that I thought was married. I had given an annulment because I discovered I wasn't divorced from the man that the love that I absolutely adored. So I gave this man an annulment and got married to this man that I thought was married, and he actually married me. That was his first and only marriage. He understood about my grief, and he accepted it, and he accepted me for who I was and who I was growing into be. And dealing with the loss of the kids, dealing with the loss of my love. He was okay with this, and he said, those are all things that have come and gone, but now we have to move forward, and it's okay to move forward in your own time. And I needed to hear that. So I moved forward in my own time, and I started to go to physical therapy. And that's when I learned about different ways to help myself with different techniques that I discuss in my YouTube channel and other places. I was able to actually fight. He understood about the child support, didn't like it as much as I didn't like it, but he accepted it as I had to accept it. There was no getting away from it. The DA made it very clear, the district attorney made it very clear that it doesn't matter. What's done is done. The children are with him. You have to pay it. So I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I have lost everything. The lies, the deception. I lost my kids. I lost my first love. And now I'm with this wonderful man who's been helping me through all of this stuff. Now, the irony of ironies is this man, how I learned about it, this man and I had known each other way back before my first husband or any of that. An ID card fell out of his wallet. I was like, I know this guy. He said, I am that guy. I was like, oh my gosh. We had grown up together in church back when I was in my youth and didn't know it. And that was like a godsend to me. I was like, thank you so much. This means the world to me. So we grew together. He accepted the child support as it was. And I had this long-term disability still from when my hip gave out in the call center. And somehow I knew that call center thing, that the long-term disability had a limitation, and I saw that clause. They're like, oh, no, you won't lose it, not until you get on Social Security disability or something. And I knew that wasn't probable at all, based on my past experience. So I did my very best to find things and to accept what was. And I decided mentally, I need to share my story with people, get back those funds that my ex got from me, show people the truth, and help others to avoid the pitfalls that I have fallen for. Like getting into an arranged marriage, which how it became a classified arranged marriage was that I pushed him away. I said, no, I don't want him in my life. I don't want him at my graduation. I want him at graduation after party. I don't want him. Well, my mother made sure that he was at my graduation party, that he was at my graduation. And when I left him for the third time, she made sure he was there at the other end. And I'm like, okay, is that really what you want? Okay, let's get married. She has since said, that's not what I meant. I'm like, well, you should have thought about that when you kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Don't push. If you don't think something is right for somebody else, don't push it. Stop it, back off, and let the cards fall where they may. Because had she not kept pushing, it would never have happened. And I described a situation to his family when I had a restraining order against him, trying to keep him away from me. And he came onto the property, pushed me on the ground, bam, 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 and said, I'm going to prove to you that you love me. And he did that. And he said, now, walked away and said, you're pregnant. When I described this to my late husband, because he did pass away, they said, you know, you described a rape. And I'm like, I did? They said, yeah. I said, you can be raped even though you're married to the person? Yes. Because if you say no, which I did, no is no. Whether you're with a family, friend, husband, wife, it doesn't matter. No is no. That's what it means. My boundaries have been crossed so many times. My no's have been wiped off the plate so many times. And so for me to come out and be open about my story, how I was found to have fibromyalgia, is big. So I am sharing with you that keeping those boundaries, your mindset, finding those statements to help you to stay strong in yourself are so essential to being able to function in day-to-day life. Is it possible to get rid of fibromyalgia? Yes, but it's more possible to bring it down to where you have a low to no pain life and living as comfortably as you can. And my husband, the one he just passed, actually, in January 11th of 2019, he passed. But before he passed, in January, November of 18, he kept saying, how much is left on child support? Because my mom and my family, they took over the child support order because I no longer had an income. They cut me off, finally, with long-term disability in 2017. The district attorney didn't care. Said, you've got to be paying this regardless. Find a way. So my family actually had to take care of it. By November of 2018, he kept asking me how much is left, how much is left, how much. I went there November 18th, 2018. I was like, I don't know how to say this, but there's nothing there owed. At least it doesn't. And so I looked at my mom and I asked her, I don't understand. This says zero. She said, Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I was in tears as I had just learned that order was paid in full. The debt was done. All the kids were well past 18, closer to 20 years old. Child support had stopped in like 2016. Now it was just paying back the back support. It was done. It was over. Everything was done. And now it was time to move forward. I remember going to him, my late husband, and laying in his arms, and we both just cried. It was, the chain had been broken. I no longer was ordered to pay child support. The government no longer had control over me. My ex no longer had anything to say. I lost a lot. I lost my kids. And that day when it was taken care of, I went and I disconnected all my social media connections to them. I went and made sure every last branch was cut. I made sure that I had no more connections because they had made no attempt to be in connection with me. And for my sake, for my mental health's sake, for my physical health's sake, for the sake of my nerves and for the sake of me and my boundaries, I went in and I blocked anyone and everyone that had connection to them so that I could live a better and more productive life. And that's what I did. He passed in peace, knowing that I had a permanent place to stay. The debt was paid in full, and I was able to move on. Has it been easy? No. but I have learned a lot in this process.